everybody, welcome to this Cemetery 101. My name is Richard Cook from Lees and Associates. I'm one of the principals and owners of Lees and Associates, and today I'm joined by our business manager and cemetery expert, let's call you that, Jennifer Thibert. So Jen, thanks for coming on and doing this today. What we're going to talk about is the collection of information needed to support municipal cemetery master plans, but it can also apply to our Indigenous clients, our religious clients as well. And there's lots of things in this series. We're only going to focus on what we call the demand needs analysis today, and we'll come back to you with some information about our financial analysis and the data that's needed for that. So without further ado, I'll hand it back to you, Jen, and maybe you can walk us through some top tips to help our clients.
Sounds great. Thank you, Richard. I'm going to share some valuable information with you now. All right. So today, as you said, we are going to be visiting the specific area of demand needs analysis and the information we require to do these analyses for our various cemeteries. And the information we're looking for comes under 4 categories. The first category is demographics. This represents the nature of the total market demand the cemetery is serving. And then the second category here is dispositions, which are essentially the major market segments that the cemetery is serving. So as you can see on the right there, we have an illustration showing the whole pie, the elements of the pie, and then we move from there, from a general market level, into site-specific information. So information about the demand for a particular cemetery site, which is usually composed of sales and interments. And the other half of the equation is the cemetery's site supply. So how does the demand compare to the remaining inventory you have available for sale, as well as any reserved pre-purchase inventory that will be used for future interments. So as you can see in the pie here, your portion would be the yellow piece of that market segment. So the first 2 elements we're going to talk about are things that either Lees and Associates has information and access to, government information and such, or we can use the municipalities' more customized preferred data sources. The reason that sometimes the municipality prefers us to use their data is that it introduces consistency between community plans that are being used by the municipality. So population data can come from the municipality, from their planning department, or other community plans, or sometimes plans that have been done by other consultants used in other departments. Otherwise, the sources of data that Lees would go to come from various levels of government data, vital statistic data, things like previous consultant plans that have been done for the municipal, provincial, or federal governments. In addition to population, we look both historic and projected. And again, that information is available through the government or through your planning departments. We also look at deaths, so the number of residents that are dying within the region. And that information, again, it could be available at your government level or at a higher governing level like the province or the federal. So once you know the number of people who are dying, what we need to know in the community is how many of those people are choosing cremation versus casket burial. Those are the 2 primary forms of disposition that residents tend to choose. And that information, that breakdown, is available very often through the provincial vital statistics data, through organizations like the Cremation Association of North America, and sometimes even local bereavement authority statistics are available for analysis as well. The other breakdown we look at is religious and ethnic groups, because different religions, different ethnic groups have preferences that favor either cremation or casket burial sometimes. And sometimes a cemetery can receive special requests from certain community member groups that have a very strong and prominent presence in the community. And again, sometimes the municipalities might have internal studies that have been done about that sort of information. So if that information is available, we would invite you to provide that.
Right. So what you're talking about there, Jen, is, for example, if we have a community where there is a growing community of Muslims, and traditional Muslim burial requires actual physical in-ground burial, that's an important factor of the population, because they are unlikely to find cremation services relevant to them, correct? And that's maybe the same with Jewish families and others, right?
That is exactly correct, Richard. And those are very important in the planning and design of your future cemetery and who you're going to serve. We have to take into account those special, unique needs. So that's exactly correct.
I think the point that you make, though, is really important, that we understand what disposition is. And as you pointed out, it's not the same as interment types. Disposition is what happens to the body after death. You can be buried or cremated, but those are the two only, or at least primary, forms of what can happen after your death.
In some communities, there is often a third very small group of people that the governments do report on, people who choose medical donation, or in the US, alkaline hydrolysis and human composting. That data is just starting to emerge, but it's at a much lower level.
But generally, when we're talking about disposition, it's what happens to the body afterwards. It's not the type of interment. And we'll get onto that in a moment.
That is exactly correct. Now, the second half is basically what is happening at your cemetery. So after the residents have passed away, they've chosen to be cremated or not cremated, as it would be. From there, now they have to choose a cemetery to go to. And this is where we are exploring how many people are going to your cemetery to purchase a lot, purchase a niche, and then either right away or in the future be buried or placed within a niche or a crypt. So this information must come from the municipality or the cemetery operator if it's a religious organization or a private cemetery, because we don't have access to that information. And the most important thing is that we get the number of interment services and the number of right of interment sales. We use that language instead of a niche sale or a lot sale, because they're not really buying the property, they're buying the right to be buried there, right? So in this event, we need to know that breakdown for each type of offering that is being provided. So the casket lot, cremation lot, columbarium niche. So we can see the proportion of demand by the community for each of your offerings. Okay.
Okay. So for a casket lot, it might be that a cemetery does 30 casket burials per year. So that's the number of interment services. But it may also be selling 40 rights of interments every year, either at need or pre-need. So one is the service and one is the sale, correct?
Yes, and usually the right of interment sales outnumber the number of interment services that are taking place usually, and that's because you have pre-need sales, right? You have people who purchase a grave in advance of their dying, in preparation for that future date, to take the burden off the family. The at-need side are the people who, they died, they didn't pre-purchase a grave, so they buy it at the time of need. So you have both of them together. Okay, so usually we see right of interment sales every year exceeding the number of interments. Now, there are exceptions to that. Mainly when you have, in the past, a large number of family members have made a lot of pre-purchases at your cemetery, and now you have a significant number of people who are being buried in graves that have already been pre-purchased, often a lot of cremated remains. So we have often a lot of urns. You'll have a casket because somebody died, and then you'll place like 3 or 4 urns on top of that in a casket lot. So when there's a lot of multiple interments happening in a grave, that's when you'll see that switch. And that tells us something else about what's going on in your cemetery, which is why we need to know these numbers, okay? So at the end of the day, the more information we have, the more detailed analysis and interpretation of what's going on in your cemetery we can provide.
The more
Okay.
confidence you can have, essentially, I think, in the numbers is what you're saying. With the more accurate, more comprehensive data, it gives confidence in the projections.
Exactly. So as I just hinted at, so aside from knowing the number of interments and sales that are happening by casket lot, cremation lot, niche, and so forth, if we can have a further breakdown of your interment data by resident and non-resident, and those interments that took place in a lot or niche that was pre-need purchased versus at need, that would be fabulous. So you might tell me, Jen, I had 100 interments last year, 50, say 25 of those were non-residents, 75 were residents. Okay, and then for at-need, pre-need, I can tell you that 30 of those were placed in graves of people who had pre-purchased them, and 70 of those went into at-need. And that tells us some very useful information. Okay. Similarly with sales, when someone purchases a lot, ideally we would know how many were residents and how many were non-residents, and then how many of those were purchased before death and how many of those were purchased after death. Okay, so this information should be provided to leads for analysis if it is available. It is very helpful to us, but it is not critical. Okay, so I just want to highlight that if you had to get us any one bit of information, if you can give us interments and sales for the past 5 years by each of your offerings, that's the minimum we're looking for. Anything else is icing on the cake.
Maybe you're going to talk about this, Jen, but I mean, one of the reasons for doing this webinar is to try and help our clients understand, the reasons why we need the information, and help you actually get it. And I think, Jen, you're available at any time for a phone call. We recognize that there's a bit of work to be done here. So maybe you can explain a little bit more about how we help our clients find their way through this piece, because there is work to be done. And I think that
Sure.
by our clients.
Yes, and as soon as I finish the final item here, actually, right, I think I'm just about to talk about the sources of where you can get this information, where you should be looking. So, in fact, that's the very next slide. So here we go. So where can you find this data? Well, many cemeteries have record management systems, software such as Stone Orchard or HMIS or Punt. There's Plotbox. There's a lot of great softwares on the market that are available that can provide this information. Innovexia, Perennia software. So lots of great choices, and we can talk to you about that if you'd like to know more information. Other cemeteries track this with old-fashioned Microsoft Excel. And spreadsheets are a wonderful thing. I'm a big fan of spreadsheets. So that's another place you might have a thing that you might have in your system that can be used. And sometimes also there are reports every year that your finance or cemetery clerks will have to make to your local bereavement authority. Ontario is a big one where this happens all the time. And the annual interment data and lots of great financial data in there too, which again, it's a great source to get that information. So we highly recommend you look for that because it's something you have to do every year for many cemeteries. Financial software.
Oh, and Jen, we're talking really globally here. I mean, across the whole of North America, we're talking, our Canadian clients, our US clients, but really, we're working with some of our clients in Africa. It doesn't really matter about your geography. These are all the things which are consistent as we look to understand from historic data what the likely trends are going to be for the future, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
In addition, don't underestimate financial software. Financial software is great because they can often export to Excel and allows you to sort data. And a lot of the time you can go into what's called the general ledger, where you see the various transactions that are going in and out of the revenue accounts and the expense accounts. And from there, you can often, staff can count the number of transactions for each type by like filtering by the price for each type of service or sale. So that's another place that you might be able to get that information as well, as if you've not historically been tracking it in one of the other ways. Okay. And we can help you with that as well. Sometimes if you produce a report from your financial software and send it to us, if you're not able to distill it down, we may be able to assist with that. And finally, there's probably the most onerous option, but there's looking through the hard copies that you may have of sales contracts and paper records, in which case a manual account may be required. Court of last resort, of course. Okay, so that's the cemetery demand data that we're looking for your cemetery that we are hoping to see. The second half of the equation is supply. We're comparing, this is a demand needs analysis, so we're comparing your supply to demand. And what we're looking for here is the number of each inventory option that you sell, casket lots, cremation lots, niches, crypts, and so forth, that remain available for sale to your community. Okay. The categories in this report should match what you're reporting to us in your sales and interment report. So if you're selling 100 casket lots a year, I want you to tell me, Jennifer, I have 500 casket lots that remain available for sale. That's what we're looking for. Pretty apples to apples. Make sure we're comparing apples to apples. And we're looking at that for each of your options. So we can tell you from there, you have X number of years of sales remaining, and you need X number more additional casket lots to serve the community for the next 25 years. That's what we're looking
Is that typically, Jen, what we look to, a projection range of up to 25 years?
That is commonly what is used as a timeline in cemetery master plans. However, when it comes to cemeteries, since you're going to be serving the community for, many hundreds of years often, the best practice is to extrapolate up to 100 years. So that is essentially, we will usually tell you have more than 100 years plus. If you have a lot of something, we won't necessarily say you have 231 years exactly worth of sales, but we'll tell you if you have more than the minimum best practice benchmark of 100 years.
Got it.
Okay. Oh, geez, I wish I had that. It was that good. Just bring out my magic 8-ball. That'd be great. Okay, so that's the inventory supply side of things. Aside from the specific number of items you have available for sale, we also look at a holistic look at the capacity of your cemetery. So we will here ask you to tell us, well, how many acres of undeveloped land that you own. And then we have an equation that will allow us to estimate how many additional casket lots and everything that you would likely be able to get from that undeveloped lands. So we're looking for an acreage number here. And then we would be able to provide an estimate about how much additional inventory you have for sale and how many more years you can expect to continue selling interment spaces to community members with the land that you have remaining.
I think that's also an important piece to explain is we talk about capacity in terms of number of years remaining. So a cemetery might have 10 years remaining capacity, right? And that's very different from saying inventory, because inventory is a number. We've got 200 in-ground casket lots available, right? And I think that's important that when we're talking capacity, we're talking about time. When we're talking about amount of inventory, we're talking about the number, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are correct. And there are other additional things that we might look at as well. You wouldn't have to tell us that, but we might look at infill, right? So we could look at, can we close certain paths to get additional capacity? So these are things that we can identify to factor in and let you know that as well. I'll go back to this slide for a moment, because one thing I don't realize I don't have a slide for here is there's an additional ask that's a nice to have that we sometimes ask around inventory. We will ask you, do you have any numbers about how many of each of your inventory options are pre-purchased and still available for interment, even though they've already been sold. And the reason why we ask you if you have that information is that we will be able to better estimate for you how many additional years of interment services you are likely going to be able to provide and still have interment revenue coming from your site even after you sell your last grave. So if that information is available, we also would like that from you as well. So this is what we call available for interment. So not just for sale. All right, so let's see here. Okay, maybe I did do a slide on that. So this is exactly what we were saying. If you could provide me a report on what was pre-purchased and reserved, then we'll be able to tell you how many more years you'll be burying your community members. Again, this is helpful, but not critical. And that provides that additional level of valued information to you. And that pretty much covers our presentation today in terms of what we are looking for to give you the most accurate demand needs analysis we can for your cemetery master plans.
Yeah, that's a great overview, Jen. Thanks for running through that. I think the takeaways for me are there's upfront, through the listening stages of doing a cemetery master plan for any one of our clients, there is this upfront data collection, and there is work required from our client team, and just be prepared for that and accommodate that within a client's own resources and capacity. So number one, that's a takeaway. Be prepared. It will feel potentially like an audit, although it's not an audit, and certainly it's not something to be scared of or defensive of. It really is very insightful, and I think our clients have always found it so revealing in terms of the information and the key insights that derive from this. So I think that's one message. The second message is we're here to help. It's not a top-down, you must give us this information approach. It's a collaborative approach. So we'll get the data together. And Jen and myself and others in the Lee's team are here on standby, ready to help you navigate this little journey. And I think the third thing is it's absolutely vital for cemetery planning and design to take away the myths and put some science behind the projections as far as we can. And so there's a very solid basis that's provided through the demand and the needs analysis. So ultimately, we understand how many more families, how many burials or interments are going to come to your cemetery over the next 25 plus years. And then we can plan for that, either with the available acres, land that you have available, or it will tell us quite quickly when the cemetery is going to run out of room, and gives the clients choices about whether they wish to continue to provide some or all of the services by purchasing additional lands or expanding into other lands. So I hope that little summary explains why this demand needs analysis is so foundational to the process of cemetery master plans.
I would just like to add, Richard, I find this exercise very helpful because it really helps cemeteries understand who they are serving, and which of their offerings that they like or don't like or are really interested in and want more of, and so it's a really great exercise for that purpose. And really, this additional detail can help you make decisions. And that's what this process is for. So at the end of the day, if you don't have this level of detail being tracked, we'll probably add a recommendation in your report that you start collecting that level of detail.
And it will help cemetery operators make their cemeteries more relevant to family needs in the 21st century, perhaps rather than the 19th century. And that's the point here of serving our communities better.
Exactly.
Jen, thanks for your time. We'll wrap it up here. And to everybody, we hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Do reach out to myself or Jennifer or any of the Leeds team if you'd like to know more. We'll see you next time. Okay. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Richard.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye for now.